Let me set this up before I start with Dilip and Rakesh, telling you why this is such an important conversation to have now, and why Dilip and Rakesh are on this panel. One is, I think, if any of you was down at Sodhi's talk, he also touched upon trust in the terms of brand choice. He elevated to another level. He took it to blind faith. I think that you achieve only after a long, long sort of journey of trust. Now, Rakesh and Dilip in their professional careers have spent a lot of time on trust. When Dilip, who is one of the foremost builders of image in India, tries to build anything or anybody, the most important thing is to instill the feeling of trust in the mind of the consumer. I trust this person, or I trust this company, or I trust this brand, I trust this product, I trust this service. It's so important in a hyper-competitive world where the differentiators are difficult to find. Yeah, so Rakesh, I requested to speak here because in addition to being the CEO of Edelman, one of the things Edelman does is they track trust, and they've been doing so for many, many years now. And the first time I think I met Rakesh was at a release of the Edelman Trust Barometer, maybe 2008 or 9 that I met him. And I was completely fascinated by what they were doing. And, you know, I think it is impossible for a brand, I mean, that's my premise, and for a brand to survive without trust. So I'm going to start with you, Dilip. Is that an exaggeration on my part, or is it truly impossible for a brand to survive without trust?
You know, I think that trust is a core component of what will make a brand survive. It's very core to a brand's continued survival. You can start with, when you start, it is inevitable you won't have trust. So you have to build the brand up over a period of time so that trust becomes one of the components of the brand. So let's go back one step and understand what is brand in non-conventional terms. A brand in non-conventional terms is simply a kind of meme for what you're doing. Right. One of these things which go viral today.
Sure.
It's basically a meme. And that will have components of colors, speed, humor, accuracy, use, a whole bunch of things. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, when you're creating that brand, you may not think of trust as very crucial. Now, to my mind, Sodhi's presentation.
When you say Sodhi, you mean?
I mean Amul
Sodhi from Amul. Yeah.
Amul's Sodhi's presentation on Amul. Actually, the brand Amul has trust for not so much as what brand Amul has created.
Right. Can you?
The real reason is because Indians of this generation and 3 generations ago, and I'm talking about from the 60s onwards, have trust in milk.
Right.
It's not in Amul.
Right.
Amul today stands for milk, and Amul has taken over the position of trust in milk. Now, if you're a new age person, you don't trust milk. I mean, milk is considered one of the 5 white poisons.
Right.
So the fact that people still consume large quantities and mothers still thuso their children with milk in the morning is because of what I call trust in milk.
Right.
And the brand has managed to envelop itself over this concept of the trust in milk. And then, if you also cast your mind back, there have been very few episodes where trust in milk has been broken, except where you put other things into the milk.
Right.
So, as long as you play the pure milk play, as I call it, you're all right.
Right.
Okay. So, now, on the other hand, if you want to trust in, say, for example, a telephone company, the trust is broken the moment you lose a connection. Much more difficult proposition to deal with. Okay? Because you trust in the technology.
Is that trust? Because an airline getting delayed, or soup coming late to the table. Is that trust or is it service failure or something?
It is not service failure.
Right.
What has happened, to my mind,
Right.
delivering a service in the predictable and expected manner is a component of the trust in that service.
Right.
In that service provider.
Right,
Okay?
sure.
Now, all of us trust in what? Air. Now, can you trust the air you're breathing? The answer is no. If you're open to scientific data, you can't trust the air that you're breathing. But now what's happening is that we are switching our trust to air purifiers. So the whole air purifier business is based on the fact that there is a brokenness in the sense of trust on air. There is a trust deficit.
Right.
So there is a product space which gets created whenever there is a trust deficit in what is expected.
Right. So Rakesh, tell me. Sure. So tell me, Dilip sets it up and he's saying clearly trust is important and trust has business opportunities as well. It's, for example, if I keep looking in the environment and look at things people don't trust, there's a need gap that I can fill. So tell me, for you it's the reverse. You've spent a lot of time and energy trying to understand, what consumers trust and don't trust, and why trust is important. So you give me your setup for this.
Sure. So I think, I hope it's working.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost is you use the word consumers. I think consumers are consumers, but they're people first. And as human beings, everything we do is basis trust. And as Dilip rightly pointed out, if you look at the air we breathe today, would the same parents who are trusting them with their children with milk, would they trust them with that air? No, we've had people leave cities and even country where people have moved out and said that this location is not good for me because I can't trust the environment for my children here. Trust is supreme, and I think there is no shying away from acknowledging that while companies and brands, they are doing their business, just as they have to take care of their financials, just as they have to take care of their talent, processes, they have to have trust right on the table, and it's one of the most important ingredients of business success. Same goes for brands. If you look at the brands that people consume, I have a data point here, which is that actually the latest figure says that people are saying, I will go by reputation of a company, but I will try the product, but unless I come to trust the reason this company is producing and doing whatever it is doing, or if I come to trust how the company conducts itself, I will soon stop buying it. So trigger to buy, but also trigger to stop buying.
Dilip, I've been trying to surf the net and find whether there are large companies in India which do a trust audit. There's so many audits people do. And if trust is so important, why don't they do an audit? Reputation we hear about, image, but trust as a...
At Perfect Relations, we do a trust audit for our clients.
Right.
We don't publish it.
Right, sure.
Because two things happen.
Right.
One is there are things you have to repair. And if you reveal some things, then there are opportunities for somebody else to disrupt you.
Right.
Okay? So that's one. The second reason is that I think companies largely, especially in the phase we have been in the last 5 years, are trying to do more with less. So they are trying to see, as a lot of companies, you can experience this in almost anything you do, companies are trying to take away elements from whatever their product is or whatever their service is to just barely survive. So at this point of time, they are not willing to, shall I say, invest too much in the space of
something intangible-ish. That's the problem, right?
That's the problem. Okay?
Yeah. But can they survive without doing this?
They can survive without doing it for a period of time.
Right. So it's short-termism versus long-termism.
It's a short-termism versus long-termism.
Right.
And in the short term, there can always be events that happen or small disruptions that happen, either triggered by For example, the Neo engine is a good example where an entire company's product line has been brought low by the fact that the company didn't bundle a certain software into the hardware, which is what aircraft engine companies do, is that they bundle the software along with the hardware. So they gave companies the option to buy a certain part of software or not.
Right.
And it was the disruption in the
failure in the software.
It was not a failure in the software. They didn't explain to the consumer, to the end consumer, to Vistara or to Jet or to Spice or whatever it is, that look, you've got to buy this and bundle it in when you're buying the aircraft with the Neo engine. So some companies, for cost-cutting reasons, to keep the trust of their consumers, bought those engines without that software.
Right.
And that caused all the problems. So now the mother company is having to spend a huge amount of money because they were also trying to sell more engines.
So again, short-termism was long term. So tell me, Rakesh, can you, if somebody had to launch a product today, in whatever category, let's say biscuit, so we can wrap our heads around it, in the DNA of the company, should you build in trust on day one? You know, often companies, you say even, say Cadbury's, which we saw Pepsi and Coke with the pesticides and so on, they started thinking about trust when trust failed. Now should companies be DNA encoded for trust on day one?
So I definitely think it's day one. Just going back to what Dilip said, absolutely it's the short term versus long term. If your long term measures to build trust are in place, let's look at what are those measures. It's not just communications. Communications
just
is very important part of it, but it's how you conduct yourself, it's how you act. But if you have that trust in place, and if there is a disruption, if there is a crisis, that trust capital will help you recuperate and come back much faster. So it's a very important sort of a deposit. It's a deposit in consumers' minds. To your point about the first mover part on trust, absolutely. I can't name the brand, but I'll talk about a situation where this company was to launch a sugar-free product in the country, and the product happens to be such that is likely to be consumed by younger audiences more than the older ones. And when we did trust investigation into that category, we found that the younger lot, they would love the product, but their parents would allow them because there is a very clear understanding of the sugar-free products not being good for children and so on. And this whole plan to launch a big brand or to take that forward, if you don't do those kind of checks, you're in trouble. And second is, so there is trust at the category level, there is trust at the brand level. Let me just talk about the brand part. Look, I mean, we have 3 bottles of water here. They all look the same. There are 2 of them different brands. Same is true for cars, same is true for phones. Products are looking the same. Brands are bringing one celebrity or the other. So audiences are drowned in sea of sameness, right? What is the difference? The difference is that, I mean, I have responded to your call for a certain thing, or you've responded to my call, Dilip has responded, and so on, is because we trust each other. It's not about us being better than others or anything. It's the trust fundamentally. And that sea of sameness in that, the crisis situations, and let me also tell you, we have youngsters sitting in the room. We also found this year that the trust amongst youngsters is highest for their employers. It's counterintuitive in the sense that people leave their jobs every 10 days or every 2 months or whatever. But at the same time, if you ask them, do you trust the government more, do you trust the media more, companies more, or the company that you work for? what they are telling us is that they trust the company that they work for the most.
More than
government and everybody else.
More than NGOs and so on.
Because there is a great level of interaction and people and the companies know how the company is behaving. They can see the conduct and they are part of it. So that participatory nature of engagement builds trust.
Dilip, you followed politicians and politics from a image management perspective for decades now. Tell me, I've read any number of attributes to the success of Narendra Modi. I've not seen very many talking about trust, but instinctively I feel trust is a big reason that he's been re-elected. What is your belief there? And if you can expand on that, not just say, I believe it is, but because you followed him, you followed...
I have been doing some analysis and also been involved in some of the election stuff, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't reveal anything which is client proprietary.
Sure.
But I think that when a politician is talking trust again, it's a bit like mom and apple pie.
Right.
You've got to envelope your image and graft it onto something people trust. So what has Mr. Modi done? Indians, despite having huge differences of language, socio-economics, etc., thanks to the fact that many of us have actually grown up with understanding bits of the freedom struggle, have a sense of trust that the leadership of this country is something that you've got to back. You may have disagreements with them, but against an enemy, you've got to back them. Okay? And Mr. Modi has harnessed that very well. It's called nationalism or it's called jingoism, depending on which side of the fence you're in. But the fact that he is seen as a leader who can give back or hit back adds to the element of trust about him. So this is a leader you can trust.
Right.
Take a different example or take a different kind of leader. There are leaders who have lost or broken that trust, and that is where new market opportunities for politicians come. Mamata Banerjee is an example where she has broken the trust, because if you go to Bengal and you talk to locals, the fact is that they feel that the Bangladesh border has been porous, and she has lost the trust of the local here, saying that she is allowing them to come in for political reasons.
Right.
So the trust is broken, and therefore a nationalist party has an opportunity to strike.
Again, seeing a need gap. So I'm going to stick with you before I come to you, Rakesh. Again, trust in brands we're talking about. What about trust in the person brand in the corporate world? We spoke briefly now about politicians. How important is it for me to, as a consumer, to trust the CEO of, say, Unilever or Nestle or Parley or whatever? How important is that as a consumer?
I think from a consumer point of view, I'm not sure what percentage of consumers relate to a CEO of a brand.
Right.
It's except for great CEOs who have built or have spent substantial time in building a brand for themselves. If you ask me today to name the CEO of Levers, I can't name the Hindustan Levers CEO. Okay? Maybe I can't name half a dozen other CEOs, but there are a few who I can name. For example, Zee, is Subhash Chandra. Okay?
He's not the CEO of Zee MELT.
But
it's pretty going
on.
No, I'm just giving you a case in point.
I think that where you know enough as a consumer, I'm not talking about as a media person or as an investor. Those are different stakeholder mappings. But if you look from a point of view of a consumer, how many people know who's the CEO?
So it's not important who is roughly what it is. Yeah. So here, Rakesh, in your tracking of your trust barometer, it's not just brands you're tracking a whole lot of other elements as well, including heads of state and so on and so forth.
What we track is trust in government, media, NGOs and business.
Right.
And in India, trust is highest in business as institutions. Government has been very high. This year again we saw high trust levels, and it's surprising that how people responding to it. That's so smart. I mean, in 2016 we saw a decline because of that year of demonetization and all, and it bounced back, and we are seeing the results. But I think important part that I just want to highlight, you talked about trust in CEOs. So it's important to kind of give you guys some data. See, why are we doing this trust barometer as an annual ritual for us? We invest millions of dollars in this is because as communicators, you need more and more evidence to see how your work is performing. In the end, you have to have impact. It's not something that you come to the office, do and go home. You have to have impact.
Yeah, but beyond normal business metrics like top line and bottom line.
Absolutely. So that's why we do this. It's a huge evidence for us. Trust in CEOs in India is at 70%, and this year it has declined by 5 points. Highest trust in India is in the technical expert within that company. If a CEO is saying something vis-a-vis R&D head, R&D guy has the more trust. Successful entrepreneurs in the last few years have gained higher trust than the CEOs. But what is most interesting to me is that trust in a person like yourself, which means all of us, none of us, but all of us, trust in that person, my peer, your peer, my aunt, his cousin, her friend, a person like you, trust in that person is higher than the CEO. And that's why when you go to TripAdvisor, when you go to Airbnb, when you go to Amazon, when you see Flipkart, people at that time are interacting with the machine and they're seeing the products, and then to take a purchase decision, they see the reviews. And then they trust a complete stranger. And they say that out of 100 people, 70 people have given 5 stars, 20 people have given 4 stars. And look at what the technology is doing. It's basically making that trust also transferable there. And people have doubt. Rather than trusting their folks at home or whatever, they are trusting a stranger at that time. And so the trust in person like you, who has online presence or word of mouth and so on. I mean, elections were a big example of word of mouth, are being trusted. So that's a big change. And the biggest enabler for that is our mobile phones. Everybody's on the phone.
Before I involve the audience in this, I'm going to ask two of you something about your own industry. Now, I interact with PR agencies all the time. And personally, I think I trust.
I feel for you. I really feel
I trust only 4 or 5 out of maybe literally hundreds of agencies I get calls from. I trust 4 or 5 where I call them up, I speak to them, and your agencies, both your agencies amongst them. I trust and I call. Is the industry itself getting destroyed by people who misrepresent what it is that all of you do? Is that entire industry getting starred?
I'll not respond from an industry's perspective, but I'll respond from a perspective of would-be restaurants.
Right.
Now there are millions of them sprouting up all over the place. Okay?
Too many.
Shifts, others, onwards and everywhere, everything. Okay? But what do you trust? You trust based on 2 things. One, what he said, that you trust what your peer group is saying. And the other thing that I use as a form of trust is, I do a visual check to see which one's crowded.
Right.
With seeming locals.
Sure.
Okay? So, you base that on that. I'll give you a similar example, just going with the restaurant example, which just reveals to the audience that I'm a constant foodie. If I'm walking down a street in Bangkok and you see shops which are selling almost the same food, there's exactly almost the same food, I will always instinctively go for the one where I find more local Thais carrying out plastic bags with food. You know that they're
taking it home to eat.
People working close by, taking it home to eat.
Right.
So that's always a creator of trust. So it's the same in the PR industry. It's a mom and pop store business. Anyone can start a PR agency tomorrow, walking out of this room, having learned lessons from
Rakesh and you.
Absolutely. Okay. So you've got your primer, you've got your 101, and you can go out and start a PR. It doesn't work like that. You've got to have been in business for a while. You've got to convince the person who you're dealing with, i.e. you, that you're here for a long term. And therefore, you have been for a long term. That is why you will always trust in a few brands, and some of the big brands have also, ruined their name by taking on clients who you can't, service right now.
Yeah. Sure.
So I would say that.
So I'm going to look for people with plastic bags walking out of people.
Absolutely.
And if I get that right.
When you get that right, and when you see the people leaving the office late,
sure.
That's a sure sign of trust.
Okay.
That means they're exceeding those 9 hours which they expected to work. Right. And that means that there is something in that brand which convinces people to stay on and do what they have to do.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to end this session and throw it open for questions, but I'm going to leave you with a provocation. This is something that somebody taught me. This is an amazing product. If it has a taste, you don't trust it. It's amazing. It's the only product. Water has to be tasteless. The moment it has taste, you say there's something wrong with it. Yes. That's truly, truly amazing, and it's a lesson of how for you to trust. Then sometimes lots of things don't have to happen. You need calmness, sameness, predictability. The moment you break predictability, you break trust also. Anyway, thanks a lot, all of you.